Hi, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 633rd New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Hugo Crosthwaite, Vincent Valdez, Irene Mei Zhi, and Jessica Holmes. We're thrilled to welcome poet Yesenia Montilla here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we're on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for actual necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the land that we're speaking from. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest and host. Allowing the act of drawing to organically dictate his compositions and works that range from intimate drawings to large-scale murals, Hugo Crosthwaite juxtaposes a wide range of textural and tonal ranges against spaces that alternate from dense and atmospheric to flat and graphic. Artist Vincent Valdez creates images as instruments to probe the past in order to reveal an immediacy to what is occurring today, and to remark on a universal struggle within various socio-political arenas and eras. Curator Irene Mei Zhi is a highly regarded arts leader and strategist who has, throughout her career, expanded the operational and programs capacity of arts organizations, organized ambitious exhibition projects, and championed her artist and designer collaborators. As a curator, she explores the intersection of art and architecture and specializes in new commissions. And writer, editor, and critic Jessica Holmes is the ArTonic editor at the Brooklyn Rail, as well as a contributor to many other publications. And with that, I'll pass it over to the host for today, Jessica Holmes.
Chloe, thank you. And thank you to Hugo, Vincent, and Irene for being able to join us today, and to all of the audience who is here and is trickling in through the virtual door. I'm really excited to get this conversation underway, and we're talking today about the exhibition that's been up all summer and continues through mid-September, Land of the Free, which is currently on view at Mana Contemporary in Jersey City. For those of you, and there may be some out there who aren't familiar with Jersey City, Irene and I thought we would start out before we launched into the conversation, just telling you a little bit about Mana itself, because it's really sort of a uncovered gem for many people here in the New York and tri-state area. Irene, did you want to say a little something about Mana and your connection with it?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction, and many thanks to the Rail for hosting this program about Land of the Free. And I'm Irene Shum, the guest curator of the show, and I organized Land of the Free with Kelly McCumsey, the director of Mana Contemporary, who couldn't be here today. And so on the behalf of both Kelly and I would like to welcome today's guests, artists, Hugo and Vincent, and everyone who's joining us today. And before I start about Mana, I'd just like to make a few quick acknowledgements to those who helped make this exhibition possible. So Susan Swenson and Joe Amrine of Periga Gallery, Philip March of the March Gallery, Gary Lichtenstein and Melissa Marr of Gary Lichtenstein Editions, Issa Pinol of the Manera Foundation, and the entire Mana team, in particular, Kristen DeAngelis and Angel Herrera, as well as a special thanks to art collector Celix Sachs, who was a great advisor. So a quick note about Mana, and you can see the image. Mana is an arts center in Jersey City that opened in 2001. The main building, which you see in this slide, is a 6-story former tobacco warehouse that is roughly 500,000 square feet. And the entire complex, because it covers an entire city block, is over 2 million square feet. The studio and exhibition spaces are truly impressive. and there's an amazing community of artists and creative professionals there. So if you haven't been, I encourage you to visit. And I'd like to make a note for all New Yorkers. You can use your Metro card to jump on the path over. So if we go into the next slide, please. The seeds of this project were planted in 2020 during an ambitious nationwide Get Out the Vote initiative titled Project 270 that Kelly and I organized for MANA and a consortium of organizations where artists from 50 states and 14 metro areas were invited to create posters that would speak to the issues of their locale. It was at that time that I introduced Kelly to Vincent, and Kelly just absolutely was struck with Vincent's work. And so you see the logo, and Vincent actually submitted two posters, one that represented the state of Texas and one for the city of Houston. And if we would just flip quickly to the next slide. This was how I was introduced to Vincent's work a few years earlier when I was working in Texas. It's his monumental painting, The Beginning is Near. I'm using the shorthand. You can see the full title on the slide. And it was recently acquired by the Blanton Museum in Austin. And Vincent, and this work in particular, was the talk of every major museum's curators for that year. And initially, the show or the project that Kelly and I were talking about in 2020 really evolved. It had started out, we were going to borrow a painting series titled Dream Baby Dream, but by the time we were actually ready to put the show together, that entire suite of paintings was acquired by the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. And actually, we also learned all of his major works, major paintings were already committed to museum exhibitions. And so thankfully, Vincent was kind enough to still want to work with us. And he allowed Kelly and I to look at his drawings and prints, which were really his private practice that he hadn't exhibited. So, and it was from looking at the content of the images that the exhibition idea expanded to include first Hugo Crosthwaite and then Joe Minter. So I think we could go to the next slide. Okay. So jumping in, this is a lobby shot of the Land of the Free. And we at MANA are especially proud and excited to present this exhibition because it's an under-recognized fact that the state of New Jersey and Jersey City in particular share jurisdiction of Ellis Island with the state of New York and New York City. And so historically, Jersey City has served as a major point of entry for all new Americans, or for many new Americans, and remains one of the most diverse cities in the United States. And and I hope this gives you a background of the show. And titled after Land of the Free is titled after the national anthem, and it contemplates human migration and patterns of movement in North America that have both defined and challenged what it is to be American, and as a nation that has been founded on the charters of freedom and populated by immigrants, refugees, their children and descendants, as well as the descendants of the formerly enslaved and native peoples. This exhibition provides a moment of pause where we can reflect on our myths and our truths, and when we have upheld and when we have fallen short of our nation and our society's highest ideals. And we hope to bring bring attention to this long-standing and constantly unfolding humanitarian predicament And I would like to state that this exhibition is by no means a comprehensive survey on the subject, nor is it a definitive statement on migration. Rather, it is an invitation and the initiation of a discussion. So I would like to briefly jump into the first exhibition. So behind that Chamberlain sculpture is, you enter into Joe Minter's exhibition, We Lost Our Spears. And this.
Perhaps maybe you could just explain to the audience how there are sort of 3 exhibitions under the umbrella title, just so they understand the framework.
Oh, okay, yeah. And there are 3 exhibitions under the Land of the Free, and those are Joe Minter, Hugo Crosthwaite, and Vincent Valdez. And we brought these artists together because their artworks conceptually, they brought complemented each other and enriched each other, and revealed these themes of, or raised these questions of what it is to be American. And just really briefly, Joe Minter's was the, we can look at the history of the African-American experience and community in the States and forced migration. And with Vincent Valdez and Hugo Crosthwaite, with Hugo's being a Mexican artist who, with dual citizenship, based in Tijuana, a city where this is a major crossing point from Central and South America into the United States. He's been able to witness this phenomenon of migration and question the content of the American dream and what drives people to America from crossing Tijuana. And then on the other side of the border, we have Vincent Valdez, who is an American artist from Texas, and his work really examines and unearths little known American history, but it's a historical analysis and social critique. And so with We Lost Our Spears is Joe Minter's 3rd solo exhibition, and it was organized by the March Gallery in New York in 2022. We traveled it to Mana in its entirety and then added this first gallery, which you see on the slide. And Joe Minter, I would like to mention, was invited to this program, but he is contentedly old school. And he intentionally, by choice, does not have a computer, does not have internet, and does not have a cell phone. So, and so we'll be speaking, I'll be speaking on about his work. But Joe Minter was born in 1943 in Birmingham, Alabama, where he continues to live and work. He was drafted into the United States Army in 1965, and during his service, term of service, he attended the Mechanical and Technical School at Fort Belvoir in Virginia. And after his discharge in 1967, he worked in construction. He only began to make art in 1989. And in 1989, in response to an announcement by the city of Birmingham to build a civil rights museum, compelled him to start making art. He's best known for his opus, The African Village in America, which you can see in this gallery. It's the wallpaper that we created. That's a photograph of the African Village, which is a large semi-permanent art installation that's located on his half-acre property in Birmingham. And the sculptures that we will see in the next slide, the next following slides, honor the quote unquote foot soldiers of the civil rights movement. And by this, he means like the numerous unnamed people whose personal acts of resistance and perseverance helped to manifest the civil rights movement, there, and as well as acknowledge their enslaved ancestors and the ancient ancestors of Africa. This particular sculpture in front of you is untitled, but if we have a look at it, I think it helps also set up conceptually what's going on in the exhibition. And if you read it, it says 50,000 shiploads of African people in chain and slavery, America. And I think at this point, I just would like to make a few points that came across in my research that I thought were interesting. So from 1525 until 1866, an estimated 12.5 million people were captured and transported from Africa to the Americas and the Caribbean, of which only 10.7 survived, and of which 388,000 came to North America. And these are numbers, are stats that were published by Henry Louis Gates. And again, thinking about Jersey City and Ellis Island, between 1892 and 1954, more than 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island. And that's just sort of an interesting sort of coincidence that I came across in my research. So let's look at let's jump into the next slide, which is the main group. So this is the group, the main group of sculptures, and all of these sculptures were an outgrowth of Minter's African Village. It's a beautiful installation. The works were selected by the artist and Philip March, who has worked with him directly for over a decade. And I'd like to mention, oh, I've already mentioned that the artist was invited. And then if we go to the next slide, I pulled out these two sculptures in particular. On the left is the sculpture whose title is also the exhibition. It was created in 1989. It was We Lost Our Spears. And it depicts an African couple who are essentially just at the moment of capture, and they are separated from their spears and their symbols of power, which you can see, those are the points behind the circular wheels. And if you think of this title and what it evokes, being separated from your weapon, your instrument that allowed yourself to essentially hunt, feed, clothe, and protect yourself. And this title serves as a metaphor for the remainder of the work in the exhibition. And on the right is the second image, and it's titled Two in the Field. So you can imagine, so the point of capture and then the abject servitude that occurred later. And Joe Minter's sculptures were created all from found materials. And you can see that these are hand tools and machine parts, and they hearken to, and as well as chains. And so they hearken to, of course, the enslavement of the African peoples, but also to the Great Migration and the transition from rural to industrial. And if we can pop to the next slide. This is three crosses in paradise. And I bring this up only to make the point that this exhibition has been really successful. And during the exhibition, this particular work was acquired by a private collector with the specific intention of gifting it to a museum. And that's as far as I can share about that. But we were really happy and proud that that occurred. And it's one of several instances in the show. And so at this point, if we were in the space, we would then cross the hallway to our next exhibition, which is In Memoria in Memory by Vincent Valdez. And this is the first gallery of In Memoria. In Memoria has essentially two galleries. The first one gallery is somewhere in South Texas, which we're looking at now, and then we'll proceed to Siete Dias. And so Vincent Valdez was born in 1977 in San Antonio. He received a full scholarship to study at the Rhode Island School of Design, where he earned his BFA. And he is the 2022 winner of the Outwin Boochever portrait competition organized by the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, DC, and the past recipient of the Joan Mitchell Foundation grant. And he's also been a former artist in residence at the Skowhegan School and the Kunstlerhaus Berlin. And his work has been exhibited at numerous museums and including the LACMA, Masmoga, Fine Arts, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the Smithsonian, among others. He's based in Houston. And so let's have a look. And Vincent, why don't you join me and we can walk through the next few slides of your work.
Sounds good, Irene. Thanks to everybody for being here. Respects to the other artists and curators and staff involved. I think that I was really excited about when you first approached me about the possibility of this exhibition because of the conversation between artists like Hugo, right? Somebody who has been a colleague for quite a while now. But I think that beyond the personal, right, for me, what immediately struck me was the opportunity to have a conversation through drawing, right? And so a series like In Memoria, it was really one of the first times, like you mentioned briefly, it's probably one of the first times that I've publicly shared these private drawing books that I've used as methods of record keeping, right? Journals, testimonials from different times and places, such as this series titled Somewhere in South Texas, which was down at the border. This series consisted of about 17 various graphic drawings that were very small in scale, probably about 10 by 14 inches with a pen. And so I created this series originally in 2015, I believe, when I jumped onto a school bus with about 35 high school students from San Antonio, and we headed straight down for the border. These students were at a private high school in San Antonio titled, ironically, the School of the Americas. And so they were part of this program that was really pretty astonishing for me to learn about even back then. This program was going to take these students down to various border town cities like McAllen, Harlingen, Brownsville. And one of the very first stops with these students was the Mcallen Courthouse, where they were going to meet the mayor and the head of one of the, I guess, chief officers of the Department of Homeland Security. And so after the courthouse, they took the students to a processing station where the students were actually there to not only greet, but to help process incoming immigrants, right? And so I remember not only standing as witness to each of these sort of episodes throughout this journey, but as a documentary, observer, right? So I would stand there and then rapidly make these drawings, taking photographs of my phone and drawing from life. And so once I returned after this trip, back to San Antonio, I ran into the studio and I completed this sequence. But like I mentioned to Irene, when we first began this conversation, these piles of books that I have as documentation, really not only of my own personal life, but of a moment in America, right? That documents really like the last 35 years, since I was, a child making these drawing books. And so it's been really interesting to reflect back and be able to pull these various books as encyclopedic chapters, right? That not only document or create a timeline about what I've observed during my short lifetime here and as an American citizen and as an artist. But I think that one of the things that I aim to achieve in this work is that there's always a play between text and image. So to take a title or to present a title like in memory, right? It becomes not only, again, documentation and an homage or a tribute to not only the lives lost throughout the struggles of immigration, throughout the struggles of civil rights in this country, throughout the struggles of the American Southwest, but it becomes a literal translation of these moments in my own personal memory, my collective memory of again, this moment and this time and place. And so very much like a graphic novel, right? These things unfold in a sequential narrative as like floating pages. I think about 2 years later, I recreated the drawings as a series of etchings. And that's what you see here framed on the wall.
And Vincent, maybe it's worth just dwelling for one more moment on If It's Not Right for You, Leave, because that has
Sure.
this instance of a specific occurrence that you witnessed traveling with the high school students. Isn't that right?
Right. So one of the, I think for me, one of the highlights about the installation that Irene and Kelly and I came up with was, this is the very first image that greets you. For most viewers that are confronted by this graphic text and image on the wall, it very much in my own sort of specific personal American experience about a statement like this, a confrontational statement, right? That this is a statement that is not only, frequently used today in regards to topics like immigration, but I think in regards to the American experience about, we've all heard that if you don't like it, leave it, right? Mm-hmm. And so the viewer that sees this, it's very easy to assume that this means, this can be interpreted in one literal translation. And as you walk behind that entrance wall and on the backside, there is a graphic text that briefly describes what this really is based upon. And so when we made that stop with the students at the courthouse, these kids were really amazing. 16, 15, 17 years old. It really was an important moment for me because I remember it provided me such a inspiration and a spark of hope when I saw how these kids were not being spoon-fed, easily spoon-fed, right? And swallowing the information that was being spoken by the officer and the mayor. And a kid, after their talk, the DHS officer asked if there was any questions, and almost every single kid raised their hand promptly. He selected the first young girl and she asked, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from Boston." She asked him, "Well, how did you end up at this job?" And he explained to her, "Well, I applied for the Boston Police Department and I got rejected. So a friend of mine called me and said, 'Hey, they'll hire anybody down here. You should apply. It pays well and you'll get the job.'" Next kid asked the question, "Do you speak Spanish?" And he said, "No." And he challenged the officer and said, "Well, don't you think it's important if you're dealing with these kinds of communities that are Spanish speaking, that you know the language?" And he said, "No, not really." And so then the entire courthouse erupted with shouts and other challenges from the students. And then another kid I remember asked one of the final questions before the mayor and the officer just cut the entire meeting off and scurried off. One of the kids asked, "So are you do you ever plan on returning to Boston, or how did you feel about leaving? And that was a statement that the officer said, if it's not right for you, then leave. And then the kids really lost it because they said, but do you see the hypocrisy in that, the irony in it? And then they said, no more questions, got to go, right? And so I just thought, like, what a moment, what an experience as an observer. And so, I think that in many ways, what I'm trying to do as the artist is present this sort of double-edged, double-sided sword in America, because that's very much in my own personal views, an examination of what the American experience is, right? What is a dream for some might be a nightmare for others, right? And it's a very fine line that separates the two realities in America. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. And Chloe, maybe we can flip forward a little to briefly the installation shot that has that encapsulating quote. Oh, or we can stop here for a minute and maybe just mention these two works, Vincent, as well.
So this was a scene that I captured with the kids, right? Actually, in one of the sections of the border, like fortress walls, right? And so what you see here is really kind of this sort of dark comical humor to me. I mean, on the left side, that view, there was this truck with the two officers there, and they saw our group down there a few feet away, and they jumped in the car and raced towards us. And then the text reads, entrance U.S. territory, South Texas, no photography allowed, will be prosecuted immediately. That was the warning that these officers were shouting at these kids. And so I looked at the kids and said, hey, well, you can't take photographs, but you can draw. You all have paper, you all have pens, get to drawing. And so what you see here, that section of fence wasn't, me just sort of fading out or not finishing the drawing. That's the way it exists there. And so I'll never forget a group of the students asking the officers, but once you close those doors, like 13 feet to the right and 13 feet to the left, it's open. And the officers were like, yes, you need to write to your congressmen and senators and tell them that we need money to finish this wall. And it was just like this clash of ideologies, right? And it was really an amazing thing, again, to be witness to that, there was this, it really gave a sense of not only a clash of generations, a clash of politics, a clash of personal views, but it really, for me, in a way, summarized where we stand in America, right? Here is a subject and a world that in many ways is so distant from a city like San Antonio even, right? It's in the center of Texas. It's only 2 or 3 hours away, but they couldn't be worlds apart in regards to realities. On the right-hand side, we met this amazing, tremendous, powerful human being who's a one-man humanitarian station, an old school Chicano activist, straight out of the 60s, but it's down there locating unmarked graves of the bodies of immigrants during, after they've crossed, right? And so he was also telling us and showing us these giant barrels of water fresh water that he would place out there, because Texas is flatland, right? Remember, there's no mountains, there's no hills, you can see for miles. He knew that these flags at approximately 11 feet of their poles tall could be viewed for up to, I don't know, 20 miles or something. But he was telling us stories in this moment about how private ranchers would come in and punch holes in the barrels that pour poison or bleach into the water. But because of this one individual, I think it's Duke University, caught wind of what he was doing. He showed us this map of the state of Texas, and in South Texas, all the red pins that were on this map were all bodies that he had already located and helped to find their families back in Mexico, South America, and all the white push pins on that map were sites where he suspected were bodies, but he couldn't gain access onto these private lands. And so I felt like he was really, a pivotal, monumental moment in the series. So I placed him, I think, somewhere, he was right in the center of the 17 drawings.
And Chloe, the next slide. And this is just briefly the quote that you were speaking about earlier, right, Vincent? And if we go to the next slide, I think there's sort of a transitional moment here.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that Irene and I wanted to, when her and Kelly came and visited the studio, I was up at a residency in New Haven, Connecticut for about 19 months. And they had walked in the studio and they saw all of these Xerox copies that I had produced based after these drawings inside of these books, and posted them all on my wall like a giant collage, you know, salon style. It spanned about, I don't know, 22 feet on the wall. And, you know, I'm somewhat messy in the studio, so I always have my tools thrown everywhere and sheets of paper on the floor. And they both really liked the idea of just being able to give some insight for a viewer about how these things are, you know, such simple, archaic, primitive ways of making an image, right? Just a basic drawing with ink. And so this is, I was really excited about this. This is one of the first times that I share my private tools with the public. And I'm waiting to get that brush back. I really need that brush. But you know, it was, I think I was really happy to show almost this complete tale about how these things really transform themselves, right? And so this is a perfect moment to introduce this first slide of the install, Siete Dias, because this was something entirely brand new for me. I mean, here we are 6 years after I've created a small book of drawings, and now it is completely mutated into something brand new again. And so I took these small ink drawings based after this series titled Siete Dias in another book that I produced in I believe also 2015. And then I was paired through Mana Contemporary with amazing master printer Gary Lichtenstein right upstairs, I think on the 3rd floor at Lichtenstein Studios. And Gary and I really had a tremendously awesome time of working together. You know, Gary introduced this material that I had never come across before. Is sort of like this translucent fabric slash slightly paper feel to it. And we started silk screening these small drawings, you know, after they were enlarged, and then came up with this installation as series. And to me, it took 6 years for this series to really arrive to where it needed to be for the very first time. It breathed new life into these drawings, you know, not only in terms of scale, but in regards to their presence of the way that they fill a space, right? They become these living, breathing monuments, you know, these sort of dissolving memories that through the translucency, you know, you can see each of these faces appearing as quiet ghosts. You know, and so this was really one of the very first times throughout my career where I feel like I've really been able to start to experiment with space, right? And installation as a site-specific installation. And for me, it's always been about the 2-dimensional images, you know, on drawings and paper, on drawings and on canvas. But here I'm really considering about not only how the viewer is going to interact with these images, floating images in a space, but I'm also thinking very much so about how this work interacts with an artist like Hugo, whose work was right next door, right? And so because a lot of that space is composed of walls of glass, you can see both artists' work simultaneously. And so that was something that I really had fun with, just considering the sort of an unspoken but visual conversation with Hugo's work.
And Vincent, would you like to tell us where these images derive from? Because I think it really ties into, you know, the things you've been talking about, especially in regards to the way your work is a document of time, and this being called Siete Dias, that really ties into where the drawings come from.
Sure, and so the title translates to 7 days. You know, it's a full day it's every day of the week. But I think this serves as a perfect example of the way that I constantly try to challenge myself as an artist in the studio, to reinvent myself, right? The work has to readapt itself. And so what I mean by this is when you look at the previous series of border drawings, right? I'm drawing from life, from images, experience, but here it's completely different. I was handed a calendar by an artist colleague of mine, back in 2014, and I was really struck by this calendar in black and white because it was based, every month, every page of every month was composed of grids of these 1 inch by 1 inch black and white portraits. Right? And so then you flip to February, March, and there's just thousands of these faces. Some of them disappeared, some of them entirely grainy, some of them crystal clear. I think there was some in color, but mostly black and white. And then I asked him, well, what is this? And he said, well, this calendar comes from, he had just gone down to El Salvador, and he said these calendars are in most cafes, right? And public corners, newsstands, taped to telephone poles in people's homes. And it's faces of disappeared people, right? People disappeared for unknown reasons, whether they are disappeared by their own government, disappeared for political reasons, disappeared as victims of the drug war or violence. But what really struck me was the range of humans that were represented, right? And so, when we tend to think about these sorts of statistics of political prisoners or even of people, caught in violence and such as the drug war, I think in America we think of immediately these sort of stereotypes of who these people, these individuals are or should be. But here in this series, we see images of like this toddler, an academic on the left-hand side. So I borrowed the calendar and I ran to the studio and I made a series of, I think also about 21 of these portraits. And so again, these original photographs were 1 by 1 inch. I redrew them as maybe 8.5 by 11 inches. And here they are now at like 7 or 8 feet tall, and I think that process again of transformation, right, is reflective of the way that I try to use this work to keep memory alive, right? I think in many ways we are all walking memorials in our own specific, unique ways, right? Based after our own histories, we all embody our own stories and narratives, our own memory, collective memory. And so it was my intention for the viewer to be confronted by these silent ghosts, right? They're just sort of blowing in the wind as you walk. The material couldn't be more perfect. When I remember one of the things that I talked with Gary about was that I wanted this material. I wanted to find a way to install this material, suspend it from the ceiling, so that it was lightweight enough so that as you walk past them, each one of these sheets, had a slight movement to them, and it really becomes this, this pulsating, breathing in and out as you experience, this story from beginning to end.
Thank you, Vincent. And Chloe, if you could go to the next slide. I think this is another transitional moment of the show, because it's a collaboration between yourself and Hugo. And Hugo, you can begin to jump in here as well. Although, Irene, did you want to say something in particular about this work?
Nothing specifically. This is the work. This is the first of 3 site-specific wall murals by Hugo, and something we didn't know during the planning of this exhibition is that the artists actually knew each other from their time in Los Angeles, and so coming together at MANA and then just sort of both were producing their own work for the exhibition at the same time. And it was just this remarkable instant where the creative energies came together. And I'd love for both of you to just share, talk about this mural, talk about your friendship, and then and talk about your experience producing new work.
I'm gonna let Hugo take it from here because this is Hugo's mural. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Yes. Well, I came into Mana to take part of this exhibition, and you know, I was familiar with Mana Chicago, where I did a residency there for a while, and I know that it had huge walls and huge spaces. No. So then when I came in, they said, oh, well, you know, we want you to do the show, you know, through Pierogi Gallery, we're going to set up these drawings, but then you're going to have these huge spaces for you to do whatever you want, and you have 2 weeks to do it. So then I thought, well, I might need help, you know. So then I remember Kelly mentioned to me, you know, Vincent is there, he's going to do this exhibition. So then I knew Vincent from, you know, way back from 2000 back in LA. So then I saw, as plan B, I thought, well, you know, Vincent could help me, you know, just do murals with me so we could fill up the space, because I was worried about, you know, the time constraint, and then also the huge spaces and the huge walls. You know? So then in a way it was kind of, you know, like me asking Vincent if he could help me with a mural. You know? But then it all worked out really nicely. You know, I had done most of the work, and then at the end, I had decided to do this piece, which would be like a nice transition between the galleries where Vincent is showing and then where I'm showing. So then I had started this mural, Saquen a sus muertos, which is kind of just improvised mural that talks about a bit about, you know, the feminicidios that happened at the border, but then presented it in a way that, you know, to me also reminded me of this scene from Terry Gilliam's Monty Python's Holy Grail, no, where there's this figure carrying a cart with all these bodies, they'll bring out the dead, which also references the pandemic. You know? So it's a way of grabbing different things from different places and kind of creating this amalgam of imagery, you know, that reflects issues of the border, but then also in a way, you know, presenting it this, you know, very surreal kind of comedic kind of way, you know. And well, let's go back. I'm not. So then when I finished the cart and I invited Vincent to partake in this mural, he started painting this police officer. No, that's stopping the cart. No, so then just I thought it was really hilarious. Not just me doing the scene, but then Vincent comes up with this idea of the police also adding to the narrative. You know, what happens at the border is this impunity from the police that, you know, makes crimes happen, no, or lets crimes happen, no, at the border, no. So then in a way it's a police officer that's either witnessing a felony or at least at the very least a health violation, no. So then this conversation of humor, no, that's very familiar, no, between Vincent and I, you know, as Mexicans we have this kind of black humor that we can play with serious social issues, but then presented in a funny kind of way, you know, in a surreal kind of way.
So the next exhibition is the start of Hugo Crosthwaite's exhibition Borderlands, which is an incredible exhibition of over 50 drawings and a couple stop motion animations, and as well as these new compositions on the walls. And I will say this, when we were in planning and when we were talking, and it came up, Hugo will be here painting for 2 weeks. I really thought, because you'll see in the slides that there's one mural that actually it's a wraparound 3-wall mural. I thought that would be the 2 weeks, and he's just so incredibly prolific that actually that whole mural was painted in just a matter of days. And so Kelly and I were like, well, Hugo, if you want to keep going, please keep going. And so he did. So Borderlands, the exhibition explores notions of immigration, refugees, borders. And at the close of the exhibition, the artist will return and paint over these site-specific murals. And let me just give you a quick bio about Hugo, and then I'll let Hugo take over. So Hugo Crosthwaite was born in 1971 in Tijuana, Mexico, in Peninsula, and he graduated from San Diego State University in 1997. And in 2019, he was awarded first prize in the Outwin Boochever portrait competition organized by the National Portrait Gallery as well. And so he's exhibited widely in museums such as the Bass Museum and the High Museum, the Orange County Museum, and his work is also in several major museums, including the LACMA, the Miami Art Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art in San Diego, as well as the San Diego Museum of Art. He currently lives and works in Tijuana, and I feel like at this point we can jump into the exhibition. This was the opening, at least when we planned it, was the opening of the exhibition, which is this incredible monumental drawing. It's a 21 panel mural titled, and I have Apotheosis of a Taco. And so I'd love for you to start Hugo.
Sure. Mana has huge walls, no? So then I knew that I wanted to show huge work. This is a drawing that I was supposed to show in Tijuana. It was for an exhibition, and it was just the centerpiece. It was just a centerpiece with the taco, and then with the two allegorical figures on the side, and the city of Tijuana. No. But then at some point, I got invited by Pierogi Gallery to partake in a solo project for the Armory show. So then for that, I thought, I could show this drawing, but then, Joe from Pierogi said, Hugo, if you could fill out the space, they always ask me to fill out spaces. No, so then they gave me the size of what the wall was at Armory. So then I decided to expand the mural to be exactly the size of that wall. So then that's the way usually I kind of work. I never plan anything. It's more of just about adapting my work to the space. No? And the meaning of this drawing, in a sense, is, I was raised in Tijuana. I lived in Tijuana most of my life. And I just wanted to play with this idea of the city of Tijuana, a border city, which has all these many connotations to it, as the Black legends of Tijuana, or the city of a vice, in a sense, because in the 1930s, it was the place where a lot of Hollywood scandals would happen. You could get divorced there, you could get abortions there, you could drink. There was the military base in San Diego. So then at 16, you could come down to Tijuana and drink and, get a prostitute. So then it had this connotation, Tijuana, of this place it has the Black legend to it. This place of vice, which even today you see it in a lot of movies. They always talk about Tijuana as a place where you can escape. You're running from the law, and the FBI is after you, and we cross the border into Tijuana and you're safe. Which is completely false. But it's this myth of Tijuana as this place, of chaos in a way, which in a way it has some truth, but most of the cities have this. Now Las Vegas has taken a lot of this in terms of the United States, imagination. Las Vegas is the place where you go, and what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. But before Las Vegas, before the 1950s, Tijuana had this connotation because it was there at the border, so close to Los Angeles. So then I wanted to take this notion of Tijuana and present it through this mural that I remember at some point through my art history, I saw this image of
Ingres
painting, neoclassical painting of the Apotheosis of Homer. And it's this grand painting of Homer, the poet, of the Odyssey and the Iliad, being risen to become a god. So then there's this man becoming a god surrounded by all these muses and allegorical figures of literature and art and poetry. And it's a beautiful painting, but also I found it really ridiculous, this idea of how we deify people, how we were raising Homer to this level of a god, So then I decided that I wanted to do the same for a taco. I'm going to deify a taco through this grand, beautiful neoclassical Baroque drawing. So then in the center of all this, there's this little humble taco, in this taco cart, with this little salt shaker and un rábano on the side. And then from there, this whole composition just explodes, with very Baroque, clouds and the allegorical images to the side and religious processions and the selling and the market and the city of Tijuana and the violence, the narco, references to narco corridos and, everything. So then it was this idea of just presenting the way you would present the front piece of a great book. When you look at when you open up a book and you see a 19th century etching of a front piece of something, like this introduction to this wonderful place. So then I wanted this drawing to be this Baroque introduction to the city of Tijuana for those who haven't been. So then I played with this idea of the apotheosis de un taco, a taco being risen to the level of God.
And if we move on to the next slide, Chloe, this is the 3-wall mural. Is that right?
Yes, it's well, when I came in, Pierogi Gallery with Joe and Susan, they had already set up one gallery with drawings and and a series of mine, but they had there was this huge space for me to fill. So then immediately I always think about well, what can you do in quick that can fill up a space. So then a video projection is always good. You can always make it big, make it small. So then I decided to show these two stop motion drawing animations that I had been working on for the last couple of years. So then for this wall, when I came in, they were setting up my stop motion drawing animation entitled Tijuana Mi Amor. Tijuana Mi Amor is a stop motion drawing animation that deals with I remember when I was a kid, I would look at these books that were about the architecture of an ancient city, Rome or Paris, and there were these beautiful binded books with beautiful illustrations of urbanization, this idea of a utopic city. How do you build a utopic city? So then I decided to take that notion and do it of Tijuana. So then it's the stop motion drawing animation that plays with gentrification, plays with this idea of presenting Tijuana as this surreal, in a way, kind of chaotic place. This video was done in 2020, and it was also the 100th anniversary of the cabinet of Caligari. So then also I wanted to present my love of that movie, also presenting it through this film of Tijuana, presenting it as this kind of expressionist city, where these lines and these harsh lines would appear and would create and construct this very chaotic city. So then when I was walking into the gallery, they were setting up this video, and it was right there at the very corner, the way you see it, on the slide on the left. So then immediately when I saw that, I got the idea, just leave it there right there on the corner, and I'm going to expand the city that appears and disappears in the video. I'm going to expand it to the sides, and cover the whole gallery,
Mm-hmm.
So then I just started doing that. Started painting this improvisation of the city of Tijuana, through the sides, And then also, as I progressed, I decided that it would cover the whole gallery, as this kind of line. So then when you first come into the space, you see Tijuana and a line, the city that's in a line, referencing also how Tijuana is a border city, that's in a way scarred by this very geometric line, this militarized place that's placed upon Mexico, upon Tijuana in particular. Me coming from Tijuana, I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, the border was very, permeable, you could come and go with no problem. Back in the 70s, you would just, in the 70s, we would go up to San Diego to buy milk, or to do the laundry, because they had great coin laundromats. So then every Friday, my father would take us to go to a movie, get a hamburger, and do the laundry, in San Diego. So then we would come and go, like there was no real difference between Tijuana and San Diego at that time, in that sense, And even there, the city of Tijuana, for me, when I was growing up, I don't remember learning English. No, English and Spanish was just something that I grew up with. So then I grew with both languages. So then Tijuana has this connotation of being the most northern city of Mexico, where even in terms of Mexico City, which is the center, the el ombligo, no, de Mexico, they talk about Tijuana as, well, not really Mexico. You know, it's more American than Mexico. No? So then, but then also you being from Tijuana, you go to the United States and, well, you're Mexican, you're not American, you're Mexican. So then Tijuana to me has this dual kind of fighting for its identity, you know, in the sense, are we American, are we Mexican? We're both, you know, it's this amalgam of both cultures, no? So then the city on the line, something that's very defined by this idea of, and it's trying to find its boundaries, no, on both sides, no, and it just expands to the side where it kind of just disappears, and it just kind of falls apart on the side, but it's very delineated by where it can go on to the north and where it can go to the south. You know? So then that's speaking to the identity of what it is to be a Tijuanense, what it is to live on the border, what it is to be in Tijuana.
Hugo, this is Irene. I was wondering, do you want to show a little clip of the second animation, A Home for the Brave? And I'd like to mention, as we were organizing it and working with Kelly, we still hadn't come up with a title, and I had a list. And actually, I never shared this with you, Hugo, but Borderlands was one before. but then I realized, oh, you just named your exhibition Borderlands. But when I saw A Home for the Brave, one of my titles was Land of the Free, and I was like, okay, it's Land of the Free. This is perfect. We, you know, all of us are thinking very similarly, and so I'd love to just show the audience just a snippet, a sample of your stop motion animation.
Yes, that's A Home for the Brave, and that's a stop motion drawing animation that I did in 2020, and it's a 3-minute, 40-second little film, and it talks about the journey of a family that's you know, that from where it's coming from, where it's based, and it's confronting the violence and the place and the poverty where they come from, and then they decide to migrate up to the north. And then, of course, they encounter all these trials and tribulations to trying to get into the United States. And then at the end, they're separated. So then it references a lot of the things that's happening at the border. You know, the violence, the impunity, the crimes that happen on both sides of the border, and then also to top it off, the child separation and the what is it, Title 41? No, the asylum seekers that are not able to, by their right to be in the United States, and are forced to stay in Mexico, where they encounter even more violence and exploitation by narcos and police and everybody. You know, so then there's this very horrific situation, that happens for the migrant. So then I decided to entitle the film "A Home for the Brave." This idea that the United States is this place, even in this national anthem, the land of the free, the home of the brave. And they talk a lot about what is it, meritocracy in the United States, the idea of you're there by merit, Well, to me, in a sense, a family that goes through all these tribulations, if there was anybody who deserves to be in the United States, it's somebody who goes through all this, So then in a sense, it plays with those notions, of what happens at the border and crimes that happen that go unanswered. So then it's this 3-minute little film that plays with that, with those ideas. And it's a stop motion drawing animation in a sense that, it's something that been part of my practice. I do most of my work comes from drawing in my sketchbook. So then I sit in the city of Tijuana, I sit in the streets, and I draw images. I draw images of people in the city. You know, I have you know, images. You know, like it's my sketchbook. So then I draw, you know, figures and places and people. You know, so then out of that, art has always this wonderful ability through art that people see what you're doing and they ask you, what are you doing? And I'm doing drawings and this, whatever. So then they want to know your story. So that I tell them my story, and then they want to tell me their story. So there is always this opportunity through drawing, through my sketchbook, that I've had these conversations with people at the border, you know? And then of course they tell me their stories about, well, you know, I tried to make it into the United States and I got deported, or something horrific happened to me trying to cross into the United States and all this. So then they always present themselves as heroes. No, I'm sure a lot of it is exaggeration, but they're very, you know, this idea of Tijuana as, you know, talking about the city on the line, is a place that people might be living in Tijuana for 20, 30 years, but they keep looking into the United States, hoping that one day they'll be able to cross, or at least, or their children will be able to cross. So then Tijuana becomes the city that it's always looking toward the north, and it's starting, I think, to look into itself. But Tijuana is a very young city. It's not like Mexico City that has thousands of years of history, you know, going to pre-Columbian times. Tijuana is a place that for the longest time, you know, even in the Mexican-American War, it was trying to become independent from Mexico, you know, like because it was the farthest point. Everything's very centralized in Mexico. So then Tijuana was in a way an abandoned place for Mexicans to be. So then they always strived, well, but the United States is there, you know, that's where we can get, you know, our resources and, you know, and our money. And even today, tourism is the most important asset to Tijuana, no? Before the 90s, where the maquiladoras came, no? This whole, you know, treaty of Tratado de Libre Comercio. But it's always looked towards that, no? And even me, when I was growing up, I grew in a curio shop, which is a place where we sell trinkets to American tourists. So then it was me about, my upbringing was about selling things to Americans, no? You know, and telling them stories to convince them to buy things, no? From my store, no? From my father's store. So then it was about presenting also the culture of Mexico, presenting it in a very digestible way for Americans to purchase for $1. So then to me, I wanted to present this kind of very graphic and comic kind of look of the city of Tijuana as something that's digestible for an American public.
Hugo, I'd love to see the next slides so we can give the audience a full range of your exhibition as well. You can see here in the installation shot that there are about 50 drawings or so. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Right?
More than like 53, I think. It's a massive show.
Yeah, this is a series called Tijuanerias. It's a series that it came out of it's basically my sketchbook. And so it's a series of, it's an ongoing series that I'm still working today, which is just drawings from my sketchbook where I take stories and narratives and create this kind of surrealistic place of Tijuana, no? You know, as André Breton always mentioned, no, Mexico, the surrealism of Mexico, no? So then I present Tijuana, in this instance, Tijuanerias, as my homage to Francisco Goya's Caprichos, which was this series of etchings that were small, kind of like in the same format that I'm working for Tijuanerias, that presented the city of Madrid in the 18th century as this place of witches and, you know, and superstition and the caste system in Madrid, in Spain, and the powers that be, you know, the church and the state and the Inquisition and all this. No? So then I decided to kind of play with those ideas, but for Tijuana, no? Like what would Goya do in terms of his caprichos if he was dealing with the city of Tijuana? So then here I play with the notions of the narcos, no? And in terms of the witches, I change it to this idea of you know, the selling of things to the United States, the prostitution that happens, the young soldier who can come down to Mexico and get a prostitute when he's 60 years old. No? So then these ideas of playing with these notions of the leyenda negra, no, precisely of how the United States looks upon Tijuana, no, and how we as a Tijuana are very willing to present this to the United States because it's money, no, because it's this commercial conversation, no, that happens between both. So then Tijuanerías is the suite of that I'm presenting here is the suite of 50 drawings, but it's an ongoing suite that still continues. This is a drawing from a more recent body of work that I'm still working on right now. It's called, this series is called Borderlands. And it's presenting this, again, this idea of the urbanization of Tijuana, this chaotic place. And so it's just me grabbing architectural references from all over the city and doing a landscape drawing of the city, but not really capturing the city. It's not an actual place. It's just me playing with different aesthetic architectural things that I like and slapping them together and kind of create my own landscape of Tijuana. No? Similar in a way how my home was built, you know, like back in the 1970s, my father had this curio shop, and then we had a couple of rooms in the back. And then as we get a little more money, we build another room and we build another room. So then at some point, what used to be the bedroom becomes something else. No, what used to be the kitchen becomes something else because we're adapting the house as we get money and as we progress. So it's this kind of nothing's planned. It's kind of like something that's just improvised through the necessity of what we're living through. So then these pieces are precisely that. It's just me building upon detail and detail, combining it together to create this landscape of the aesthetic of Tijuana. No? And then because it's unpopulated, it has no people on it, it has no trees on it, it's just these architectural details that are slapped together. It started looking to me like this notion of futurism of Tijuana, no? Like something that's very organic and I mean very mechanical and very you know, geometric and very. So then it started looking to me like, well, you know, like films like Blade Runner by Ridley Scott, you know, that present this excessive urbanization where we grab the old and the new and we're mixing it together. No? So then this series of Borderlands plays with this idea of you don't know if it's Tijuana in the past, you don't know if it's Tijuana in the future. It keeps it at this kind of twilight place. No? And then, of course, on top of it, I slapped these narratives that happen in white. So then in this instant, it's about immigration, a place of transition where nobody wants to stay in Tijuana. They're always thinking of, I'm coming from someplace in the south and I'm heading towards the north. And Tijuana happens to be the place where I pass through. And you might stay in Tijuana for 20 years, but you're still thinking about, well, yeah, but this is a place that I'm passing through, you know, and at some point I hope to get to the United States. No? So then it's that, you know, it's these feet that are taken from codices, from Aztec codices of how they would present migration, no? With these, with the footstep, you know, of people walking. No? So then it's these footsteps that are passing through this twilight place of Tijuana. No?
And Hugo, I know that we have the audience eager to speak to the artists and perhaps Irene about the exhibition. So perhaps we can just land on right here, if that's all right. I was going to say we could just land on the final slide, which is, I believe, the last mural in the show.
Yes. Well, once I finished that mural with the video and the mural installation of City on the Line, I had time. So then I decided to, next to the big drawing of the Apotheosis of Taco, I would do this drawing that's an improvised drawing that takes imagery from my sketchbook. It takes so that I just improvised imagery and just slap them together and create this composition that deals with this idea of immigration. And then also the purpose of me doing these murals was because nothing's planned, and then it's also me presenting muralism as performance, where I would go into the space and people were there and I was painting live and people could see me paint, and it's just this performance of me wearing this shirt that says Hugo Rótulos, like I'm presenting myself as a sign painter and not as an artist. So it's this persona that's creating these murals. No, you don't know if I'm the artist or I'm somebody who was hired by the artist to paint this. And so then I'm improvising these murals, and it's always with the most simplest of materials, like something that Vincent showed in his exhibition. No, it's just a little container of paint and a brush and a step ladder. No? And from there, it's just me creating this narrative that happens. No? And then creating this grandiose narrative, no? Of taking stories from migrants, something that people are people that are considered expendable and creating these huge, wonderful murals that will also be expendable, because in the end, they're all going to be painted out. You know, I'm returning on September 12th to Mana to paint out these murals, to deconstruct these murals. This construction and deconstruction, which is something that happens in my mural performances. No? Construction by slapping together these details and creating a narrative as I go along, based on sketches, and then from there at the end, deconstructing that mural by slowly painting things out and kind of breaking apart the narrative. No, construction and deconstruction is something that happens in poetry. You know, you construct a poem by putting together words, and then deconstruction was a term that was used by Borges for removing words for a poem, to study them, to study the visual image of what a poem, of what a word in a poem creates. So then by isolating details in the mural as I'm deconstructing, that happens. No, the story stops making sense. It starts becoming a more abstract piece. And then you're just seeing faces or details of things. So then it forces the viewer also, while you're seeing that, to deconstruct the narrative that's happening at the border, that's happening in the mural. Yes.
Thank you, Hugo.
Sure.
And thank you, Vincent and Irene, as well. This has been such an enlightening conversation, and I hope everybody will go see the show. It's open for another few weeks, and I would love to turn it back over to Chloe so she could take some questions from our audience today.
Yeah, thank you so much for that amazing presentation of the exhibition. It's incredibly powerful and really amazing to learn more about each of your practices. So thanks for sharing today. We do have a few audience questions. And so I'm first going to hand over the mic to our friend GE in the audience. Hi, GE.
Hello, thank you very much, Chloe. And thank you everyone for this. This is astounding. This goes everywhere. It's wonderful. I was taken by the word apotheosis, and can you talk a bit about the work of apotheosis, which it seems as though you've obviously taken from previous traditions of painting, which is kind of a raising up of humanity, and the way that it then frees us who partake of it, it frees us from our established patterns and limitations, I believe. So if you could talk a bit about that, or if that's what you believe it's doing.
Well, well, to me, art history has always been a major reference to me in my artwork. Goya, Angra, traditional painting, 19th century painting, because that's the way I educated myself into becoming an artist. I knew I always knew that I wanted to draw, but I never knew where my drawing was going to take me until I actually took art history courses, and there were these huge, wonderful books, of art history that had all these paintings in black and white. So that I never saw these works in color. No? So then, to me, it was just very naturally grabbing those imagery and translating them into my drawing, which is black and white. I'm not, I'm autodidactic. Soy un artista autodidacta. I taught myself how to draw, how to create art. I don't know how to paint, but to me, looking at these paintings in these black and white illustrations, to me, it made sense. All these imagery, black and white, I can grab it and present it through my process of drawing. So then this painting has always been one of my favorites of Angra, the apotheosis of Homer. And then at some point I had the opportunity to do this. I want to do this piece about an apotheosis of something. And then that's where this idea of, well, for 19th century, I'm sure it was very grandiose to think, oh, Homer becoming a god, or the way we grab our heroes, and George Washington becomes a god, or something like that. But in this case, I just wanted to do the taco, which I love tacos, and I wanted to give it this, grandiose thing to something that's very domestic, something that I love, something that's as simple as a taco, which can also serve as an image of identity of Mexico. We think about Mexicans, we think about tacos.
I thank you so very much.
Sure.
Thank you for that question, GE, and for that answer, Hugo.
Sure.
The next question is from Carolyn. Yeah, thank you both, and I mean, thank you all so much for this conversation. I'm stuck wondering about what art can and can't do, and I'm wondering if and when that crosses your minds, Vincent and Hugo, taking on subject matter, obviously in proximity to huge systemic, I mean, violence. I find your work very like diagnostic and then also really transformative and full of humor. And I just, yeah, I'm wondering what each of you think about the limits and possibilities of art. Right.
You know, for me, I think that on a daily basis in the studio, as an art, not only as an artist, but as citizen and as human being, right? For me, this is the true power and nature and the potential of what art can and should be, right? Beyond market values and trends, or, you know, for me, art is the ignition of critical thought, right? And critical thought is what I feel we sorely are lacking in humanity right now, because I'm often reminding myself about artists who have come before me, right, throughout the history of the world, like a good novel, like a good song, like a great painting. Art can really unleash a wave of reminders that we are not alone in our struggles, right? Contemporary America in the 21st century, this is nothing new. We know how these tales end if you look at history. And I think for me, this is, history is such an important component that really builds a lot of the framework within my concepts and images. If I had to sum it up in one statement, I think about the writer and social critic Gore Vidal, who once said, "We are the United States of amnesia. We learn nothing because we remember nothing." That to me says it all, right? This is how we have arrived at this moment in time. And so if I can use an image to combat and counter the social amnesia that hovers over all of us like a dense fog, then so be it. This work has to be effective. It has to be utilitarian. It has to serve a purpose. It has to tell stories about people and for people.
Yes, very much. I am in complete agreement with Vincent. And at least in my case, it's always been about just my love of drawing in terms of my work. I grew up in my career shops, and that was the way I passed the time, by drawing. And so then for me, it's always just been this practice, this love of this of the craftsmanship of drawing. And I'm not a very smart man. My eloquence is through my work, through my drawing, through the drawing that I love to do. So then, and through my drawing, I like Tolstoy, you describe your village, you describe the world entire. So then I draw what I see with my sketchbook. I draw what I feel from where I'm from. I'm not a documentarist. I'm not a journalist. It's just about what makes, what motivates my drawing is those things that I love and those things that I hate. Those things that bring out extreme feelings in me. So then through my drawing, I try to express that, the things that I love and the things that I hate, the people that I love in Tijuana, but then the things that I hate that's happening to Tijuana, and at the border, So then it's not necessarily about me trying to preach politics or anything like that. It's more about just me trying to evoke the same emotions that I feel for where I come from and where I'm from. But most importantly, rather than being a figurative artist, because it's figurative, it has a narrative to it. There's just no way you can't avoid that. You draw one figure and you draw another figure, and that's a conversation, and a story starts to develop. So then I feel like it's just about telling these stories where I come from, and then trying to make people feel the things that I'm feeling to where I come from where I'm from. You know? And then also just the public to enjoy drawing, you know, to enjoy the craftsmanship of drawing, which is something that happens with my mural performances, where I go and just start drawing, you know, nothing pre-prepared, nothing, it's all improvised. So then people come see and they see kind of the demystification of an art process. You know? How you tell a story through drawing, you know, the same way you tell a story through writing, you know, some way simple. You know?
I know for me as a curator, it's been interesting because it's how do we present artists who have different practices, different interests, different mediums, and but to put them together and be sensitive and sensitive to the artist, but also to consider the audience, and how do you put together a show to create critical thought that but not essentially point to conclusions, but to actually open it up so the viewer can interpret. And it especially with the work of Vincent and Hugo, they were very, very complementary. This particular series was very, very complementary to each other, and could activate the space at Mana and Jersey City in a way that would be thoughtful and meaningful, but still beautiful and fun, in some cases fun, with the Hugo's work. And so those were our considerations organizing.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you so much for those responses and for that question. Our next question is from Raven.
Hi all. So my question, I was really fascinated by what Hugo said about making your culture like digestible for Americans. So I was curious, who is your audience and who do you want to be legible to? And is there anyone you're not speaking to? And do you find yourself resisting that urge to make yourself or your culture digestible to Americans, or like, you know what I mean? Like the balance between like making it digestible for someone else and wanting it to be widely understood by the masses or whatever. This is for everyone can answer.
I know as a curator, I never, or just as an individual, I don't like to be preached to. And so at least in my curatorial practice, I just try and things that turn me on, I try and set it up and present ideas and open things up for a dialogue versus making a definitive statement. Or again, this is not a comprehensive survey. What if it were, it would have many more artists. It would include people of other ethnic, it would include women, it would include Native American voices, as well as and Asian voices and other cultures. But this sort of grouping of artists allowed us a window into this larger discussion. So I really don't want this exhibition or the audience to think that this is definitive in any way. But I think the works by all three artists are very evocative and can, open a window into just a way, some of ideas to consider. For example, as the curator, I will be very specific. I talked about migration because migration is not political. If it became a show about immigration, we were talking about law, we were talking about policy, we were talking about history. And I, rather than getting political per se, what I wanted to look at is the human dimension. And by setting it up this way, we could look at, for example, I love Somewhere in South Texas, because these were all vignettes of people's experiences. These were personal narratives, and then in the same way, I'm gonna get tongue tied, but Hugo's work of the Tijuaneros were again like vignettes, exaggerations into like the street life of what it is like to be in Tijuana and experience the city. So that's at least what I'm talking about. And as a curator, I would hope my audience would be as wide as possible. No one's excluded in my book. Everyone's invited. Artists?
Well, at least for me, one way that I feel that my work can be widely seen is the very fact that it's just figurative work and it's drawing. I feel that's the first connection that I make with the public. From curators to art historians to the simple person on the street, who just looks at the drawing, he sees a face, and wow, and and then also the way I present my drawing, which is, like I mentioned, this demystifying process of creating a mural where you can see how I'm doing it, and nothing's pre-planned, and I'm actually grabbing narratives from people, which is something that has happened through my mural performance. This process of me going to a place is something that I've done in several locations. I did it for the Cuenca Biennial in Ecuador, and for Los Angeles, Chicago, and right now I'm doing it here at MANA. And it's this place where I go and I improvise a mural, and then sometimes a conversation happens. People come and they talk to you, what are you doing? Or how much are they paying you to do this? And this conversation happens, and they tell me their story, I tell them theirs, and sometimes those stories translate and appear in the mural. So then it's this opportunity for conversation. I remember this wonderful thing that happened to me in LA when I was doing this improvised mural. A little girl came to me and said, oh my God, she saw one of how I was drawing a face, and she said, in Spanish, son palitos, son palitos, sticks. These are sticks. She was seeing that they're lines. It never occurred to her how to create a face, and it's just a matter of just doing little lines, and then just start creating a face. I went to her sketchbook, to a book, and she started imitating, and trying to do lines and create a face. And to her, just seeing that on the wall, to her, it completely opened up this idea. Wow, you can create imagery con palitos, with sticks, with lines. To me, that's the way I feel like my work is digestible. People are able to accept it through this beauty and the craftsmanship and the eloquence of drawing.
For me, I'd say that probably one of the biggest challenges that I've always faced in the studio by choice is trying to find various ways of working and thinking so that I could transcend any one personal perspective, political point of view, but mostly time, right? So when I think about the majority of work that I've created over the past 22 years, there is a certain timelessness that I try to inject into the work. It is very much rooted in the past as much as it is in the present. Trying to figure out how to navigate all of these different sort of pinpoints in the studio. I've always thought of myself, it's almost like a boxing match, right? I'm just constantly dancing around the ring, trying to duck, trying to keep myself from getting cornered. And that's really very much the way that I am as an artist in the studio, right? I really try to find a way to produce images that is going to relate to multiple audiences, right? All the while sprinkled on top of the personal experience, right? I want to find a way to tell these, ever compromising who I am and where I come from. And that's the thing that's most exciting for me as an artist in the studio. This becomes, at the end of my lifetime, one day will be my own personal examination of the world around me. But it's extremely important to me that it transcends even beyond me, right? I become passenger to the work. And that's taken a lifetime, really, of learning to just kind of take a backseat and allow the work itself to drive me wherever it's going to lead. It may be straight off of a cliff, who knows? But you have to trust in the process of the work, and that's not something that can be taught to you by an art school. That's not something that can be learned from a YouTube tutorial, right? It's really part of the experience of being an artist and learning to just trust in what it is that you are creating and to trust in your vision.
To dovetail off of your comments, Vincent, I truly feel that as a curator, and probably I don't want to be so bold to speak for both of you, but just this fundamental belief that the aesthetic experience between the viewer and the art object is at best, and its most meaningful, transformative and revelatory. And the hope is to create work that provides this moment of insight, moment of solace, moment of wonder to all.
Thank you guys. Those are great answers. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for those answers, and thank you so much for these conversations today. Before we transition, Jessica, is there anything else you wanted to end with, or you're muted, by the way?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for being here, and a special thanks to Vincent, Hugo, and Irene for such an illuminating conversation. And I hope that everyone will have a chance to get out to Jersey City to see the exhibition Land of the Free. And yeah, and perhaps we turn it over to our poet today.
Yeah, at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending with a poetry reading, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome our poet laureate of the day, Yesenia Montilla, to the stage. Based in Harlem, Yesenia Montilla is an Afro-Latina poet and a daughter of immigrants. She received her MFA from Drew University in poetry and poetry in translation. Her work has been published in Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, Prairie Schooner, Gulf Coast, and in Best of American Poetry 2020 and 2021. Her first collection, The Pink Box, is published by Willow Books and was longlisted for a PEN Award. And her second collection, Muse Found in a Colonized Body, is forthcoming from Four Way Books in 2022. Welcome, Yesenia.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. So thank you so much. This was incredible. The conversation was so wonderful. I took tons of notes, and I hope to use my Metro card to get over to Mana very, very soon and see the exhibition in person. I have 2 poems for you guys today. The first one's Manifest Destiny. How we took something like universal law and made it violent. How we are violent. How we think destiny is 2 things, a reward and a good time. How we think manifest is one thing, a destiny. How we don't know how to be still. How we don't know how to desire and then let go. How we want it all, only to be less than tender with it. How when the springtime comes around, we find ourselves in a field surrounded by dandelions. And when a soft wind blows, the specks stir and take flight around us. How we know nothing, so we call it snow. And this is Maps. And I wrote this poem for Marcelo Hernandez Castillo, who's an incredible poet in his own right. I sort of feel like this poem can speak a little bit to the art that was being done by Hugo and Vincent today. Maps. Some maps have blue borders, like the blue of your name, or the tributary lacing of veins running through your father's hands. And how the last time I saw you, you held me for so long. I saw whole lifetimes flooding by me, small tentacles reaching for both our faces. I wish maps would be without borders and that we belong to no one and to everyone at once. What a world that would be, or not a world. Maybe we would call it something more intrinsic, like forgiving, or something simplistic, like river or dirt. And if I were to see you tomorrow and everyone you came from had disappeared, I would weep with you and drown out any black lines that this earth allowed us to give it. Because what is a map but a useless prison We are all so lost and no naming of blank spaces can save us. And what is a map but the delusion of safety? The line drawn is always in the sand and folds on itself before we're done making it. And that line there, south of El Rio, how it dares to cover up the bodies as though we would forget who died there and for what, as if we could forget that if you spin a globe and stop it with your finger, you'll land it on top of someone living, someone who was not expecting to be crushed by thirst. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Yesenia. Those were really incredible. And thank you so much to Hugo, Vincent, Irene, Jessica for this amazing conversation today. The show at MANA is open through September 17th. We really encourage members of the audience and those viewing this in the archive after this to see the show. And we'd like to thank MANA Contemporary for helping us prepare for the conversation today and providing images. We'd also, of course, like to thank the Terra Foundation, who sponsors our NSE program and makes these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive. You can view today's event in our full archive on the Rail's YouTube channel. For the past 22 years, the Rail has brought together art, music, dance, film, theater, literature, and thoughtful social and political meditations in our monthly publication and in our public events like here on our daily NSE. You can check the chat for a link to donate to support our writers, editors, and operations here at the Rail. And if you're free tomorrow at 1, we have a conversation planned with Nick Cave and Matthew Biro on the event of Cave's show Furthermore at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. And we'll conclude with a poetry reading by Anthony Almendarez. You can now turn on your microphone and say goodbye as you leave.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you.
That was
Thank you.
incredible. Thank you.
No.
Bye, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Right.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for